All right, here we go.
What's good, everybody? I'm Robert Dickens Jr.
This is Ryan Reed.
This is Elanders Frazier.
This is John Gaal, and you're listening to Volta.
Changing the conversation
For percussion educators,
Designers,
And performers. Let's call this session of Volta to order.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another podcast of Volta Percussion. Tonight we are joined by Mr. Robert Dickens Jr., Mr. Ryan Reed, and of course, Mr. Elanders Frazier. Tonight's topic of conversation.
Did you forget
Do
the
you keep
topic?
charging- I'm about to go. Oh, well, you say it. When I got. Tonight's topic of conversation. When to change course. Keep pushing forward, or make a Yui and go somewhere else.
Get the hell out of there.
Get out of Dodge or keep moving forward. You make the choice.
What's up, everyone? Thanks so much for joining us. Hope you enjoy our little enlightened state there. This is Volta Percussion with Ryan Reed, Robert Dickens Jr., Elanders Frazier, and of course myself, Mr. John Gaal. Thanks for joining us. Elanders, you're really good at telling these topics. What are we talking about tonight, my friends?
Changing directions or staying the course. How to determine when to punt or when to keep moving in the same direction. So this can be from a couple of different perspectives. This can be if you're a performer and you're on one journey, if you want to keep moving in that same direction with the same program, with the same instructors, etc. This could be from a creator standpoint, a creative standpoint. Shout out to our creatives out there. I see you, Rob. If you're moving in one direction as a creative and you want to keep moving in that direction, or you want to just change directions completely and try something new. This could be from a director standpoint. If you've been doing the same things as a director for a long extended period of time, and now you think that it's time to try something new, bringing some new minds and start to collaborate and do some different things. So how to determine when it's time to change directions, Volta, or when to push through and just keep the course, keep it the same, stay steady. So how do we know what's our determining factors? What should tell us when and how?
Which topic are we talking about first? From education, from performers, from directors? You mentioned three. Ryan, which one do you want to talk about first?
I think the easiest one is to talk about, maybe not the easiest one, but the one that I think we can all kind of talk about is from a director's standpoint. Just because we all kind of serve or have served in that role pretty recently, of a director, a caption header, or something like that. And I'll actually start this off. Just I think I've talked a little bit about it on earlier episodes of being the director at my new school. This is my second year, and just looking at when I came here. My expectation was that it was kind of similar to the previous school I'd been at for about 5 years. And had built up a program. They were doing very similar things with like multiple concert bands, doing a concert percussion ensemble that was the competitive thing. So I was like, oh, this is easy. Just keep doing what I've been doing. And quickly found out that sometimes the clientele or membership of an organization or ensemble is not the same. And what worked at one place does not necessarily work at another place. So I quickly made the decision after the first year, and again, my first year ended 3 months early with COVID, or 3 months early with COVID, but made the decision of like, all right, I've got to change my direction of how I teach and focused on fundamentals and less on like music and doing stuff. Because the guy before me, they did a bunch of percussion ensemble music at this school. And I love doing like percussion ensemble in band class. I get to pull the kids out 4 days a week and work on either fundamentals or band music or percussion ensemble music. And it's a really great gig to get hands-on with the percussion and not have kind of the band dictate the pace of class, which is new for me to be able to pull them out and just work at our own pace. But when the fundamentals are lacking and deficient, it doesn't matter what you're trying to play, because it all sounds variations of bad when there's no fundamentals. So like for us, we did the first 3 months of school this year playing out of George Stone stick control. Just plugging away different sticking patterns, different rhythm patterns, that kind of stuff. And I also, in this, it's harder because I don't have complete control over like the beginners and how they progress, because my schedule's not set up in 6th grade. I get basically 7 through 12, and the 6th graders start during the year. And they're on a completely different schedule than the 7th and 8th graders, so I don't get to see them as much. But for me, I had this kind of thought process of like, why do we start students on mallets, like beginning percussionists? Because we're asking them to hit something that they've never done before, move their hands in a way they've never done before, read notes, which they've never done before, on an instrument that you cannot touch with your hands, And for beginners, that's the biggest thing, is that, that's the biggest thing I try to impress upon band directors is that like wind players get to physically touch their instrument. So they're reading and they're counting and all these things, but they're physically touching their instrument. Like the trumpet has 3 valves. Tomorrow it's going to have 3 valves. If you move a kid to a different chair, that trumpet still has 3 valves. If you move a kid to a different room, that trumpet still has 3 valves. But with a percussionist, you move them 1 step to the right, 1 step to the left. What's in front of them is completely different. So why are we asking them to do all these things at once? And I think that's been a big change for me of like, rather than getting kids to play better through like different instruments, just put them on a drum pad. Just put them on a drum pad. And for me, that's going to be the biggest change in my teaching. We did a bunch of virtual teaching with Matrix this winter, and it was all drum pad teaching over Zoom. And for now and forever, like clean front ensembles on drum pads. Because the reason why front ensembles play dirt is rhythms are out of time. They're worried about their notes being right. Okay, so let's take the notes away and let's just play rhythms in time. Just set up a drum pad right there, clamp it to the keyboard, take it off. And that's been a big change for me. So I'm kind of on this kick right now of like, all right, if it doesn't work, there is no stay the course. It's just not working, punt it. Get that bad boy out of there. I think when it's time to stay the course is like at the end of a season or at the end of your concert cycle, where you're like, all right, the information is there. Like, we just got to keep getting reps in and stay the course, get the players feeling more comfortable with things. But it's like when we're trying to take it to the next level, I don't think it's necessarily through the same processes that we've done as educators. I think we have to try different things and be like, all right, try this. All right, now what latched on? Now just do that. And really, again, with the drum pad thing for me, because that's been the biggest like punt of like, we don't need to clean stuff on keyboards or teach better keyboard playing. We need to teach better, like, make the drum pad sound the way you want the drum pad to sound. Now, when you have one mallet in your hands or two mallets in your hands, use that same approach and just get the keyboard to sound good. And then what is good playing? What sounds good on a keyboard? Listen to me play it, because I want you to sound the way I sound. So it's just, or as close to my sound as you can. So we're gonna play on drum pads, then we're gonna play on keyboards, and it has proven to make major strides for a lot of the kids. Now, I got to do some things to get them reading music a little bit better. But this year for me, going from last year where it was like, all right, we're trying to do all this percussion ensemble music, but we don't sound good, and we can't read, and we can't do this, and we can't do that, was like, all right, punt that. We're not going to teach like how to sound good through music because you're focused on the music. We're going to teach how to sound good on a pad, and then deviate that out to all the different instruments and that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of times as directors, we stay the course too long on something where we need to go and change directions for the sake of our students, just because it's what we feel comfortable with. And I think that has been my biggest challenge to myself over the last year of like, all right, is this working for the students, or is this working for me? Because if it's working for me but not the students, it's not working. It's not working. As a director, that's where I've seen the biggest thing. Again, I've been punting a lot more recently than like trust the process. I think we did a podcast on that a while ago, or at least we had a conversation on that. I hate trust the process. It's not working. It's not, just change it. It's not working. But that's kind of where I'm at right now in things, because my process is going to have to change again next year now that the kids are sounding better. So it's almost like this is year one of a multiple year curriculum for this. So it's been exciting. It's been good.
Well, I think also maybe a lot of directors at this point of time are doubting their own processes and are, instead of keeping the course, are changing direction, is because of the catalysts that have affected our environments, primarily speaking, COVID, right? Everyone, we've already talked about this multiple times, but because of this new norm of teaching, in my situation and with my district, I know a lot of other districts, a lot of students are already probably more in person than Fort Worth ISD is. We're still doing the hybrid, but even with the hybrid, most of our students are virtual. Because of our situation, and from my personal experience, because of COVID, we've had to change our actions multiple times, because we'll come up with an idea of like, okay, these kids aren't coming to class. This is what we need to do to get them to class, or come to an after school rehearsal, or just do something. We'll chug down that road for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and we don't really see any improvement. So then we start freaking out a little bit. Okay, the end of the season, or the end of the 6 weeks, or something, some type of assessment's coming up. Do we keep doing what we've been doing, or do we need to change the course? Okay, maybe we should, a new variable pops up. So let's change the course and try something else. Maybe it was a motivation factor. So how can we create that intrinsic motivation through extrinsic means, right? Let's do this instead. Do that a couple weeks, a couple months. And I think you can, the flip side of what you said, Ryan, is that if you don't stay the course for an extended period of time, the other negative effect is you change your mind too often to actually see any lasting results. And it's that hard middle line of that you're always having the balance of like, okay, always evaluating, is what I'm doing for the program, with the program, actually going to be a return on investment long term in a couple of years? Or do I really need to get a nitty gritty and reevaluate either how I'm teaching, or what I'm teaching, or who's teaching the concept to the students, and do I just need to go on a completely different approach? Because of this new catalyst of COVID and this online learning, as a director, it's very important to not only question what you're doing, but more importantly, I would say, really evaluate your teaching style, because COVID's going to go away eventually. Like already next year, a lot of administration that I've heard is that kids are going to be back in person. It's going to happen. So if we go back in person, do we have to change everything all over again? Or are you patient enough to keep pushing your program in the direction that you've thought was best and just keep on going and fighting the good fight? So it's a hard question, and you kind of have to evaluate it for your own personal group. Is keep pushing the good fight long term, or should you punt and try a different direction?
Based on what you just said, I feel like the most important thing that I've come to in this whole scenario of whether or not to stay the course with something or to punt is having good mentors and other people that you respect within your own field. As a performer, as a designer, as an educator, people that have been there before that are good designers can tell you, no, what you've written is good. The kids just need to execute it, and that's going to get better over time. So you're eventually going to get credit for that. Someone that's been down that road would know whether or not, because I'm sure that there's people that have had good moments that they've designed and then they get sidetracked because one judge doesn't like it or they can't read it or they don't understand it. And sometimes judges, unfortunately, some of them are not very clear on, I get what you're trying to achieve, but maybe it's not coming across right now because the kids aren't able to do it. You know what I'm saying? So that I feel like will be a stay the course moment where it's like, okay, I see what you're trying to do. Maybe it's a little bit above what those students can achieve right now, but you should stay the course and go ahead and, try to do it. Obviously, when you get closer to the end of the season, you got to kind of make a decision and say, okay, let's punt if we need to make it as effective as it needs to be. But I feel like that same thing can happen for a performer as well. Like for some that are, maybe you've tried out for different groups multiple times and you're not making the cut in the groups that you want to be in. If you had someone else that could evaluate you, that would know what that standard is, they can tell you how far off you are. So they can tell you whether or not you should continue going and just try again, or whether or not maybe there are some significant things that you need to fix. Because even though that's a complex question, I feel like the answer to it is very simple. And I think that those that have the experience can help us answer that the best. Same with directors. I feel like when, for example, I talked to Terry Sanders maybe like a week ago about some things about, just kind of getting him to evaluate some telling him what was going on in my programs and like what he thought about it, and kind of getting his background on how he's achieved excellence for as long as he has with his programs when he was directing. And I think the thing that is very reassuring and like sobering for me is whenever I talk to people that have been in the game a long time, like it's the simplest stuff. Like it's not complex. It's like, hey, it's this simple. Make sure your kids can do this, 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 and this, and everything else will be fine. You know what I mean? Like they're able to cut through all the fanciness of like, maybe I can teach eights this way, and maybe I can teach blah, blah, blah this way, or maybe I can teach four mallets, standing off of 1 foot and like blah, blah, blah. Like, it's like, okay, that's cool. Maybe that's the new hot way to do it. But guess what? Kids got to get their taps down. Kids got to get their grace notes low. Kids got to be able to control all of their mallets independently. Like they got to be able to do all these basic things. So I think sometimes we can, because we are creative as educators, we can sometimes get in our own way and overcomplicate things when it comes down to our approach. I think if there's anything to punt, I think the idea is there anything that's hindering this from being exactly clear and super easy for every student to understand it like that. Those are the only things that I feel like, okay, I should change that. If I'm using an example or I'm using verbiage that students don't understand, like I need to get rid of that. But anything that I can do that's working consistently, that's simple. And I would say how you can tell that it's working is if I would say 80% of the students understand it, I would say that that's working. If the way that you're trying to build your program, 80% of what you're trying to achieve, you're getting it, then I would say that's a stay the course situation where after you go on over time, you're going to get that other 15, 20%. But if it's not even like working above average, by all means, punt. By all means, punt. But again, I think that having others like you guys on this podcast, other people that are around that have done what you're trying to do or have done similar things or doing similar things, they can give you a better perspective on whether or not, hey, what you're doing is good. You just need to like give it some time, or whether or not it's like, I don't know if that's really effective. So I think that other perspective is really, really, really important when making that delineation.
I think I like what you said. I think perspectives are so important. Like just to simplify what y'all said um, about like which direction you're moving in, because a lot of the times we can't see um, what's in our way because it's from our perspective, right? Like when you're talking about a designer or a director or a performer, we're only looking at it from our perspective. So if there is something that's hindering us, we can't always see what that hindrance is. So it's always good to reach out and see it from a different perspective or have another perspective come in and say, hey, did you notice this? Or did you notice that this was, impacting your students? Or did you notice this was impacting the program? Did you notice this was part of your curriculum? You know what I mean? Like, I think that in all of the times, especially in my career, where I've seen the largest strides is when there was something that was hindering me and it took someone else's perspective to open up a new channel. And I'll give you a point of view. We reorganized Southwind's exercise packet 2 years ago now, because it's 2021 now, going into preparing for the 2020 season, so 2019. And I was ready for some change. I didn't know what change it was, and I didn't know how drastic those changes were going to be when Rob sent me those ideas. But when those ideas came, I knew it was exactly what we needed as an ensemble to grow. You know what I mean? And the more we collaborated, the more we started to see, yes, 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 yes. You know what I mean? And that's one of those things for me where I felt like I couldn't see what was hindering us in some respects as a group and as an ensemble, which was some of that variation because of my perspective, which was staying the course versus knowing when to punt, right? So it was like I was staying the course with what I had done as a high school director. Why wouldn't I? That's what I had done for, 16 years, but I'm not teaching a high school anymore, right? Like I'm doing something different. And when I'm doing something different now, it's time to start looking at things in a different frame of reference. So getting those opinions, getting those different perspectives and saying, okay, what is something that we want to do that really sets us apart? This is what we want to do. This is how we're going to frame. This is how we're going to characterize it. This is what we're going to work on it. more importantly, this is why we're going to work on it. So we determine the why, and then we strategically set up all of the reasoning, and then we put, not only did we define it with the notes, we defined it with the pen, so that it also has the words and the the nomenclature, everything kind of put itself in place. And it's like, this is better than I could have ever written it by myself, because I was only thinking in that one dimension of how I thought when I was just staying the course, right? And I think that, like, that's the beauty of making sure that you have a collaborative spirit, right? And like, and I say a collaborative spirit because I think sometimes, like, we definitely want to live and breathe a lot of creativity in ourselves. But I also think that with that creativity, it's good to share, because with that sharing, you sometimes will get ideas and information from others that will spark either more creativity, or it will keep you from making mistakes that probably don't need to be made. And I've found that so many times throughout the things that I've done, is that sharing has kept me from making mistakes that I have avoided just because I was like, hey, can you take a look at this? Or I've just been like, hey, I just want you to see this real quick. And it's like, oh, did you mean to do that? I'm like, no, I did not mean to do that. Let me go check that out real quick. It's like, it could be the most innocent thing, but it could be the one thing that, and in a base packet that completely, like, throws everything off for students. Like, it's those things in, like, whatever that you're trying to do, whether you're a performer, director, or a designer, whatever it is that you're trying to do, or whatever it is that you're trying to say, from your own words, that perspective or that change, from someone else's point of view, could be the one thing that takes it, kind of throwback to what we talked about, from good to great, right? Like, that could be the one piece of information that really changes how you do things. And you can't be afraid of being able to change courses sometimes, because, to Ryan's point earlier, staying the course sometimes is a fear thing. Like, we sometimes get hesitant because it's like, oh, well, this is what I know. This is safe. I'm comfortable. I'm going to be here. It's like, but, forget all that. It's time to go. It's going to change anyways. Might as well just do something new. You know what I mean? Go with the times. And you never know where you might end up. You might end up in a completely better situation than you were before, because you change courses and now you're set up on a new path that you would have never been on had you just kept moving in that same direction. So,
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I think the collaboration piece is a big part of it, because, I mean, nobody has it all. No matter how smart we are, how experienced we are, like, we need other people to be able to tell us that, like, we're doing the right thing. And sometimes I call my friends just to know that, like, man, like, this isn't really working. And sometimes I know I need to hear, well, nah, it's not working because you're not doing it right. And then other times I need to hear, like, no, that's going to work. It's just that it's your first year at that school. Like, those kids probably aren't going to listen to you because they're still missing whoever their other director was. So they're not really going to listen to you. Or the band director that you're working with, they're used to doing this. They're used to doing X, Y, and Z. They're probably, like, you don't have that say so yet, even though you have the skills or ability to do it. So I think the perspective part of it is really important, like you said, E, because it can definitely help us all be a lot more sober about whether or not to punt or stay the course. And I think as far as punting is concerned, we're just really talking about methods, I would assume. I mean, the ultimate end goal is always the same. Like, we want a whole bunch of kids doing drum on. We want a whole bunch of kids doing band. All right, you want to make your favorite group. You want your kids to score well. You want the show to do well. Like, that's always the same. But you may have to sacrifice the way that you are going to do it for something that might be better.
You said it earlier, Robert, about the idea of, is there some piece of information that makes this unclear? And I think that's the big question. As any of the topics that, you know, whether you're a performer, a director, a designer, I think that's the biggest question you have to ask yourself. Is there something that's getting in the way of, as a director, is there something getting in the way of the students clearly understanding what they need to achieve and how to achieve it? You know, as a performer, is there something standing in the way of me making the piece of music or the piece of art that I'm trying to create? If so, I got to change the information that's going from my brain to my hands, or I got to just do more reps of it, you know. And as a designer, is the idea clear? Because I'll tell you, as a designer, like, I've written plenty of ideas that are clear to me, but then you see them in real life and you're like, that's not that good. Or like, that didn't work out the way I thought it was going to on some Alias, when, you know, everything's balanced and perfect. You know, so I think you gotta ask yourself that's the biggest question, is, will this create clarity in the product or the program or the performance? You know, like, if it will create clarity, stay the course, give yourself more reps, keep doing it. But if there is if something is leaking in that is creating muddiness, you got to get that information, that path, that methodology, you got to get that kind of out of the way so that you can create clarity.
I like that. Clarity in the product, the performance. Yeah, man. I like that phrase that you just said. That's a tagline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. I think sometimes performers underestimate the clarity of information sometimes, and their source, and where they're getting their clarity of information, and then seeking outside sources to make sure that they're terribly clear about what they're being asked to do. Because I think sometimes it's like, you hear information and then it's like, I think I heard what they said, but then they don't ask those follow-ups, you know? Like, I hear it all the time when I'm at work. Like, a supervisor says, does anybody have any questions? And then we say it as instructors all the time, like, anybody have any questions? Nobody ever has any questions. And I feel like it's such an underutilized skill as a performer. Like, we're so in our heads sometimes about, and I remember being this way as a performer too. Like, we're so in our heads about what we have to do. We don't think that we have the right sometimes to ask for clarification about things. And it's like, well, why not? Why don't I have the right to ask for clarification about these parts, about this drill, about this? I feel like there are certain things we ask for clarification for. Like, I felt like it was like body. Like, I always asked for clarification on that because that was just the newest thing that we learned. But it was like, you should already know how to drum. How dare you ask for clarification of these beats? You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's like, but like, body is like, oh, this is a new skill set as a drummer. I'm allowed to ask about that. But you can't, but you've been drumming for 8 years. You can't ask about clarification of these beats. You know what I mean? Like, well, why shouldn't I? You know, if it's going to make it more clear for me to be able to terribly understand it, then yes, I should be asking for clarification. So I feel like we have a responsibility almost as educators through this platform to tell performers it's okay to ask your instructors and or your cohorts, your colleagues, your other students in the ensemble for that clarification when you do not get it, because it is only going to help you be a better performer. It's only going to help you be a better musician, because ultimately, if you want to be the absolute best at what you do, then clarity of information has to be at the top of what you're trying to do. If you don't have clarity of information, you really can't start checking off the rest of those boxes. Clarity of information has to be at the top, because if you don't understand the information that's going in, you really can't start checking off the rest of those things, right? If you don't understand, like, the understanding part has got to be numero uno, and then everything else just comes after that, right? So it's like, we got to understand the information of how it was meant to be sent out first, right? That we're just talking about basic communication, right? If we don't understand the basic communication of how the information was meant to be delivered, then at that point, we can't really ask you to do anything else if you're not understanding how we meant to send the information out in the first place. So that makes me think about a lot of the interviews that I hear with other instructors talking about how they wrote music and how it was meant to be played, and the importance of talking to their students about why they wrote the music that way. Do you all find that discussion is important with your students? I think I personally do, but for you three, do you find that is important?
Definitely. I mean, I think that it's really important, because people that don't know you aren't going to teach your beats, your choreography the same way. And they can explain it so that students can put the right inflection and understanding into it. So I'm definitely one that if I wrote the music, or if I'm coming up with a choreography or the staging or whatever, I do not allow other people to teach it for me, because they're not going to explain it the way that I'm going to explain it, so that the students have the full clarity of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's really imperative, especially in, take the marching activity, whether it's marching band, drum corps, indoor, whatever. Like, the word musical journey is on the sheet, and the journey is not like right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, 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 right, left, bang. That's, there's got to be something more than that behind it. And I will, is every ensemble ready for that discussion is the bigger question, because the answer there is not always. If you've got a regional A ensemble that needs to focus on the rights and the lefts and the putting the rhythms in time and the putting the beats and that kind of stuff, you give them little snippets, so it's like, all right, at this big impact moment, this is what it is. At the culmination of the show, this is where you're angsty, or this is joyous, or this is this. But it's not from note 1 to note 100. This is the journey that you're trying to communicate. There's a lot of ensembles that I've taught that are not ready for that discussion. Again, they get snippets of it because that is important, because there's got to be something behind the performance. But, I also think that can lead to some of the lack of clarity, is that if you give an immature ensemble this like deep ethereal meaning to the show, and they're like, you gotta perform this whatever that they don't understand, they're like, all right, let's perform it. And meanwhile, their hands look like this as they're playing everything. And they're like, but we did a good job performing, right? Yeah, you just, the 60% of the sheet that's playing clean is missing. So I think it is extremely important if the ensemble is mature enough and ready to handle it. Whereas like, and sometimes it's brief. Like, I'll take my 2 years of indoor at my school, for example. Like, last year our show was just the idea of a river, like, and different ports along the river, and different like coming into port and seeing the town and that kind of stuff. But the deeper meaning for the students was that these are the different aspects of your life. Like the first port is home, and the second port is, I can't remember, but it took you through like leaving home and then like basically party mode, and then like the fear of not being around everything that you're comfortable with, and then taking you back home. So it's the idea of a river running in a circle or running back to the ocean or whatever. That's all they got. It's like these different ports are different aspects of your life because it need to be something that they're connected to. Whereas this year we did our show, the show's about the wedding adage, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. And just taking them through that, like the idea of being at a wedding, and like this is the ceremony, and at this point where we hit the climax of Canon in D, this is where the bride comes out and starts to walk down the aisle, and then this is the reception after that, and then this is deeper into the reception, into the night, and that kind of thing. And then we've got the culmination of the celebration of like, hey, we're finally married, we're doing this. But relate that to anything in your life that you're celebrating. But it was all based around this wedding saying. And it was like straight through of like, this is the bride getting ready. This is the bride coming out. This is the walk down the aisle. This is the celebration afterwards. This should be fun. This should be this. This should be the culmination of all of it. Yada, yada, yada. And it was like deep into it. And you can see their performance. But that's only because their hands are ready to handle that deeper meaning. Versus, hey, we gotta play 1, 2, 3, 4 together, not miss the wrong notes. Like there's when there's wrong notes and wrong rhythms, there is no deeper meaning than put those in time and on the right note, please. So I think that is super important.
I feel like that gives us. I feel like that gives us
for the right
positives sometimes.
Right. Go ahead.
I didn't know when you.
That was 3 times. That was funny.
I was gonna say,
we're lucky that doesn't happen more often.
I know, right? We're actually pretty good about timing it fairly well. I was gonna say, I feel like that gives us false positives sometimes on either changing courses too quick or like convincing ourselves we need to like stay the course when the clarity is not where it needs to be because of something that we didn't define adequately, right? Like we didn't define it adequately from Jump Street, so now it's like, well, the students aren't doing what we need them to do. We need to change things up. It's like, well, are we in a hurry to change things up because we didn't define something adequately from Jump Street? Or you know what I mean? Like, was this on us from the get-go? Like that's, sometimes I think we have to look back on, we kind of have to do some of that self-reflection too, before we move to that concept of changing courses or staying the course, punting or staying the course, do some of that self-reflection to determine, is this something that maybe we could have prevented so that we know how to handle it going forward, you know what I mean, as well. Like, obviously we don't want to repeat things in the future as well, you know what I mean? Like that's some things that I think about too, is in every season that I've done, I take a look back to see, okay, how can I make sure this doesn't happen again? Because that was bad. Like I don't ever want to go through that again. I don't ever want to rewrite the closer again. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like I just
I feel you not rewriting the closer though, bro.
Bro,
I had to do that this year, and I was like, but I think I was definitely at a point to where there were some things musically that my students weren't able to do, but I did also understand that, and visually, but I did also understand that there were some things, like we said before, that were prohibiting the clarity. There are some things that are just prohibiting that. And also just knowing how literal certain things have to be. I think that's the toughest thing to balance too. For those of us that try to do things that are somewhere between abstract and concrete is, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, like, in order for something to really come off cool, it has to be literal enough for people to understand what you're talking about, but it also has to be abstract enough for it to be intriguing and interesting and to not feel like you have it all the way figured out. And that's kind of tough to do. But it takes some time. Like, you're gonna wind up doing something that doesn't work. And you have to be okay with the fact that you're gonna do something that doesn't work. As long as you can be honest enough with yourself to say, you know what? Yeah, I did spend a whole bunch of time doing that. I did write that drill, but that last minute, it doesn't really show the what the show's all about. So I'm gonna rewrite that. Kids might be a little peeved, but we about to get some new drill. We're just gonna make it do what we gotta do. So I think that's a big part of it too, is just getting over that fear that you're gonna do something wrong. Like, you're gonna do something that doesn't work. Like, you're not the first director, instructor, performer that's gonna do something that doesn't work. And I think also, to E's point that I heard earlier about being a performer, for those performers that aren't making the groups that they want to make, I would honestly take the feedback seriously, that you're getting. Like, there could be things that don't have necessarily anything to do with your hands that just don't show that you're confident enough to make that ensemble. Like, what things other than your hands are not communicating that I am of a world class or open class or whatever class caliber, and I should be on this instrument? You know what I mean? I think there are lots of small things that go beyond the technique and all the rest of that stuff that you might have to ask yourself, or ask an instructor or someone else who's on that level. Like, honestly, like, when you see me play this instrument, do you feel like you can compare me to these other people that I'm trying to stack up against? And that is a vulnerable question, because we have to be ready for people to say no. You know what I mean? Like, we have to be ready for people to be like, nah, that's not gonna work. That's not hot. No, that's dirty. Like, nah, that doesn't. And honestly, that's probably one of the funniest things. That's probably one of the funniest things I find about Terry Sanders in general, is like, because I know that Terry cares as intense as Terry is. I know when he comes in and watches one of my groups, if something is bad or does not work or is like, question mark, he's not gonna give me the BS and be like, oh, it's all right. Just, they'll get it. They're gonna get those 5-wit rolls. They'll be fine. They're going to get that really cool permutation. Like, it's going to work. It's going to work. Nah, you need somebody that will be honest with you and be like, your season is over in 2 weeks and they cannot do this. Change it. Like, they can't do it. This ain't auditions. This ain't the beginning. And it's like, oh, they'll grow into it. At this point, the shoes are too big. If it's 2 weeks left and y'all still losing to the same group, still not getting what you want, you still getting cut from the same groups, you need somebody that'll be honest with you and be like, bro, you need to do something different.
That word, I think, is not utilized enough. Vulnerable. Putting yourself in a vulnerable position emotionally to be able to handle that feedback. Because, we live in that generation of everybody's a winner. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets a congratulations. Everybody gets a 1, 2, or 3. What does that mean? What's a 1, 2, or 3? It's a yes or a no. Either you made it or you didn't. right? Like I mean, I get rating systems and knowing where you stack up, you know, with individuals or not. But I think at the end of the day, we all want to have this sense of, you know, am I in a position to make an impact here? And if not, what do I need to do or where do I need to go? And I think that's the best that you can do for a student. Like for me, I try to make it as clear as I can for individuals to say, yes, this is a place that you can be based on this information, or no, this is not the place that you can be based on this information. This is where you need to try to go, because, you know, this is the level that you're currently at, or this is the information that you need to get to where we need you to be at. You know what I mean? And like you said, that's tough information to hear for anybody. And I know it was tough for me hearing that information. It makes you feel like your world is about to end when you think you got it figured out. You feel so confident going into an audition sometimes because you've done so much work, and for somebody to sit on another side of a table and tell you, nah, you ain't got it, or nah, you need to work on this, or, you know, thank you for coming, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, oh, but that's so many hours. And you feel like all those hours are just gone because somebody with some combed hair told you your permutations were, you know, trash. You know what I mean? Like, but, you know, like at the end of the day, you know, it's not that your hours were wasted. It's just that, you know, you still have more progress to make to be in that caliber, you know? And it's a very short list. You know, I think I was listening to a podcast the other day, or a YouTube video the other day. And it was, I think it was like the tenor drummer. One of the new channel just popped up on my YouTube the other day as a tenor drummer on YouTube. I think he marched Cavaliers back in like the early 2000s. And he was talking about how he had gotten cut so many times, and he was given tips about, you know, how not to get cut and stuff like that. And he was just talking about how, like, when you think about it in reality, it doesn't matter how good you really are. Like, there's only so many spots. He's like, you could be the best person. You could do all the right things. You could have all the music, because he went through like all the things you need to do. Like, you got to make sure, you know, read all the music, because he talked about the one time he got cut when he didn't learn every single exercise in the packet, and they just happened to play the very last exercise that he didn't get to. He got cut on that audition. Then he went through the one where like he didn't learn the right technique. Then he got cut on that audition. Like, he went through like all. Then he was like, he did everything he was supposed to do on the very last one, and then he still got cut because he was the sixth person out, and they only took 5 people. And he was like, you know, at the end of the day, you can't be upset with that, because sometimes there's just not enough spots. And you just have to be happy with the progress that you're making as a performer. And I think that's one of those things, like when we're talking about staying the course or knowing when to punt, that's when you know, like, that's stay the course. Like, you've done everything that's been asked of you. It came down to it. There were only 5 positions. You were the 6th person. They had to make a choice. It was going to be you or somebody else. It came down to that one person. Stay the course. It just was not your year. And I think what he ended up saying was somebody dropped out, and then he got called to fill the spot, like going into all days or something like that, and still ended up marching that year, which was to his credit, because he was the 6th person, which is pretty awesome. You know what I mean? So it was like, you know, he said it turned out to be a good situation, but because I think one of the things he talked about was having a good attitude, because nobody wants to be on tour with somebody with a bad attitude. And he was like, had he not had a good attitude, he probably wouldn't have gotten that phone call, you know? So he was like going through all the different steps and stuff like that. So I was just like it made me think, like, man, like, you like it absolutely makes a good point in the fact that you could do everything right and still be on the end of that cut list. So you can't take it personally in that frame of reference. You just have to know, like to our point today, when to stay the course or when to change directions. And just because you may get released from a contract or cut or not selected doesn't mean that, oh, it's time to hang up, I'm done, I'm never drumming again, like I'm, you know what I mean, like. And some people make that decision. Some people are like, I'm done, I'm never gonna play again. Something that's like, don't stop. Pick up the phone, start calling people, see who has spots open. You know what I mean? Like, start doing your homework. Like, this is not the end of the situation. It just may be just the end of this particular situation. So just some things to think about.
Lovely. That was a lovely ending, E.
Yeah, man. It popped into my head because I the way he framed everything, and at the end he was just like, he still got cut. I was like pulling for him. I was like, dang, he still got cut. I was like, that's messed up. I was like, he made it seem like he did all the right things. I was like, but I'm glad he got the spot at the end of the day. But it's so true. Like, it's like you could do everything right, and then that's just the way the world works. Sometimes that's just the way the world works, but turned out to be a happy ending. So I guess we're wrapping up here. To our credit, little hiatus for us. We had a happy Easter, some injuries in the house, but we're all doing a little better now. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in. As always, if you want to connect with us, we invite you over to our Instagram. You can visit us at Volta Percussion. You can always send us an email if you want to ask us some questions, reach out to us, communicate us. You can find us at voltapercussion@gmail.com. And then just kind of wrapping up for us today, my name is Elanders Frazier. I've got Mr. Ryan Reed, Mr. Robert Dickens Jr., and Mr. John Gaal. Looking all fresh there. We hope you all have enjoyed this episode today. We've got a few more episodes left in this season before we kind of go on our season hiatus. But don't worry. The reason why we take a season break is so that we can plan and prepare and hope to come back with a brand new polished version of Volta. So we will see y'all when we see you. We hope you all have a great weekend and enjoy it. Peace.
See ya.
Cut.